Hey guys, it's time for Manhood in the Media. Listen, I got a fun story for you and an application. So, I often will read a blog post or listen to a podcast from Brett McKay at The Art of Manliness. Love his stuff and appreciate what he talks about with manhood. Um, and so, he had a post this week called the Abilene Paradox. I'd never heard of this. Turns out I've experienced it, and I bet you have too. So here's the deal. The title of his post is The Abilene Paradox, Why Groups End Up Doing Things Nobody Wants to Do. And so I'll just start with that question. Have you ever been with a group of guys and you end up doing something you didn't want to do? You just kind of went along with the crowd. I got to tell you, it's a bad idea, but we've all been there. And so why is it called the Abilene Paradox? Fascinating. Brett tells a story here that a management professor proposed this from an article in 1974. He said there was a time in his young life where I guess he was married and his family was hanging out on the back porch of a home down in Texas. They were playing dominoes and drinking lemonades, hot, sweltering day in the summertime. And his father-in-law says, "Hey, why don't we jump in the car and go to Abilene and eat at the cafeteria?" Well, somebody said, "Well, that sounds like a good idea." Somebody else said, "That sounds like a good idea." So they all jumped in the car, drove 53 miles. I think it was in the 1950s. There was no air conditioning in the car. The restaurant was hot. The food was mediocre. They had the windows rolled down, so they were windblown. By the time they got back, 53 miles both ways. The food wasn't great. They were gritty and covered with grime. And they got back to the house. And then they decided to be honest with each other. And somebody said, I would have just preferred to stay home. And so at that point, everyone agreed that nobody really wanted to go, but they all went along because they didn't want to be the only one who said, "I really am not interested in a 3-hour trip to Abilene for mediocre food." So this became the Abilene Paradox, that everyone goes along with something that no one wants to do. And so where's the manhood in this? Well, here's the manhood, guys. There are going to be times in your life when everyone around you is going to suggest that you do something that you're uncomfortable with. For young men especially, someone's going to say, "Hey, let's go take a drink of this," or "Let's go do this." It's right there in the book of Proverbs where young guys will go off and they'll just torment people. And someone has to be willing to say, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stop this. I'm not going to go along with the crowd." As a matter of fact, my dad told me as a kid, he said, "Michael, if you're ever with a group of guys and the guys decide that they want to go somewhere and do something that you know is wrong, that you know in your heart you don't want to be part of because it's a bad idea. Son, even if you're the only one, I want you to be the one with courage to say, 'No, I'm not going to do that. That's not the right thing to do.' I want you to be courageous." And I haven't always done that in my life, but I tell you this, when I have said, "No, I'm not going with the crowd," I've always found that there was someone else who didn't want to go with the crowd either, but they weren't courageous enough to step up. And again, I've not always been the courageous one. Sometimes it's someone else who says, "No, this is not the right thing to do." But I'm telling you, this is part of manhood. This is how I see manhood in the media in this Abilene Paradox. Don't go along with the crowd just because you're afraid to buck the system, that you're afraid to say no, that you're afraid to confront. And I've really got a fun quote here from Billy Graham. He says, "Courage is contagious. When a brave man takes a stand, the spines of others are stiffened." Let me give that to you again. Billy Graham said that courage is contagious. You know what? Fear is contagious too. And foolishness is contagious. How many of you guys have been involved in some contagious foolishness? Most everyone can tell a story. But listen, courage is contagious. What he said is, when a brave man takes a stand, the spines of other men stiffen. So this is one of the places where I've seen manhood in the media this week, or a lack thereof. Guys, I want you to be real men who are willing to take a stand, who are willing to step up and say, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go along with that. I am not in agreement with where this group is headed." And even if you're the only one, would you take the stand? Because I think you'll find that you're only the only one for a short period of time, because there's some other people who are feeling the same way that you are. Dudes, don't get hung up in a car. going to Abilene in the middle of the summertime with no air conditioning. Don't do the foolish stuff. Listen to what the Lord is speaking to you. Listen to how the Lord talks to you. Let your conscience be close to Him and let the Holy Spirit guide you, and be courageous enough to say and do the right thing. Be a good and godly man. God bless you, man.